Hey everyone, welcome back to Poisonous People. Today I'm going to be discussing a very unpopular opinion. How unpopular? Well, as far as I can see, I am the only person on the internet who holds this opinion that I know of. So I'm guessing it's not very popular. And that is the view that it is not possible to gaslight oneself. When we're talking about self-gaslighting, we are always pretty much going to be operating from a modern day framework. It is the modern day model of gaslighting that has introduced a lot more possibilities as far as what qualifies as gaslighting or not. And that's why self-gaslighting falls under this new modern day model. You're not going to find it in the classic old school view of gaslighting. And regardless of which model of gaslighting you subscribe to, both models agree it is a form of abuse. Now, my view is that it is simply not possible to abuse yourself. And the reason is your fight or flight system won't allow it. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. But Jennifer, what about self-harm, right? There's plenty of people out there who engage in these self-harm behaviors, such as cutting or burning themselves with cigarettes. And then, of course, there are those people that are successful in committing suicide. So you might be saying at this point, this doesn't make any sense because people harm themselves all the time. The difference in those cases is that self-harm is not interpreted by the fight or flight system as abuse. In all honesty, self-harm in those situations is not even interpreted by the fight or flight system as harm, let alone abuse. When you talk to people who engage in self-harm, they will almost always tell you that the reason why they're engaging in those self-harming behaviors is because it provides a sense of relief. For instance, when I ask people why they cut themselves, many of them will say it's because I don't feel anything. And when I'm able to feel physical pain, it comes as a relief to me knowing that I can feel something. So when somebody's cutting themselves, it doesn't register as abuse. It doesn't register as harm. It actually registers as something that is comforting and self-assuring. The only way that you are able to self-gaslight is because your mind has accepted this behavior as something that is comforting. People will sometimes be unsure of themselves. They'll second guess themselves. I am not denying that that occurs. I do believe that that occurs, but I am not buying that that's gaslighting. Okay, so if it isn't gaslighting, what is it? Well, I believe there are two possibilities of what is actually happening. The first is that the person is just experiencing the effects of hypnosis or hyper awareness. In other words, it was programmed into you. You didn't put it there. It could also be a learned behavior, which is now a habit. Gaslighting starts with an abusive person. It is not something we do to ourselves. It is either a romantic relationship where somebody was gaslighting us, or maybe when we were children, our parents had a habit of constantly programming into us, you're just too sensitive or whatever. That means that you learned that behavior. Without somebody programming you to do that, you wouldn't be doing that. I've never in my life heard of somebody who just randomly started gaslighting themselves for no reason. And when you think about it, why do others gaslight us? The motive is because they're trying to undermine our sense of reality. Why would we do that to ourselves willingly? Why would we want to undermine our perception of reality? I mean, I can think of reasons why we would want to alter our sense of reality, right? People take mind-altering drugs just for that purpose. We can alter our minds, we can alter our perceptions for good. So again, it doesn't fall under the heading of abuse, and therefore it doesn't qualify as gaslighting. But any time that somebody else does this to us, we are not gaslighting ourselves. What we're actually doing when we question ourselves or doubt ourselves or tell ourselves that we're too sensitive and whatnot, what is actually happening is we are engaging in learned behavior. Learned behavior is not abuse. The motive behind learned behavior and hyper-awareness, it's not abusive. Hyper-awareness, in fact, is not abusive. It's neither good or bad. It just is. For example, you may not have ever noticed that the alphabet song, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, is the exact same melody as Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. You may not have noticed that. But now that I pointed that out to you, now you might recognize that every time you hear those songs. Somebody else did that to you, and now you're just following suit. The second possibility, when we talk about if it's not self-gaslighting, then what is it? Is that these are OCD compulsions. In other words, plain old-fashioned doubt. Usually what happens is you have an obsessive thought, and most of the time, there will be a compulsive action that accompanies that unwanted thought. And the purpose of the compulsion is to soothe away that unpleasant thought. So if I feel like, oh my gosh, maybe there's some germs on my hands, and that's an unpleasant thought. What if I am gonna catch some disease from these germs? Then what I might do is I might perform an act known as a compulsion, and I'm going to wash my hands. And by washing my hands, that kind of soothes the thought that there are germs because I just wash them away. Right? I personally believe that when people are talking about self-gaslighting, they're actually talking about an OCD-like response to an unpleasant thought. Many times we are not comfortable when we think about people that we love as bad people. It's not comfortable for us to point out flaws in people that we love. So as soon as we get this idea that, oh, this person's manipulating me or this person's being abusive, that becomes just as uncomfortable as the mind saying, oh my gosh, what if there are germs on my hands? And so in order to cover up and do away with that thought, the mind will produce another thought, and it might sound something like, I'm just being too sensitive, or I'm just making a big deal about this. So that is one way where it could generate from within yourself. But again, I have to really ask, is this abuse? Or is it that the mind is trying to do away with unpleasant thoughts? And if that is the case, I'm not saying you have full-blown OCD, but I'm going to say that that would make more sense to me because your mind is never going to allow you to harm yourself. I don't think that's gaslighting. I think that's just a compulsion. So at this point, you might be thinking, are you kidding me right now? You have not really made a case against self-gaslighting. All this is semantics. Possibly. But what if the semantics is a very big, important part of this argument? Take a look at these two sentences and tell me if you feel that there's a difference between these two sentences. Someone is gaslighting you You are gaslighting yourself. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably felt a little bit more anxiety looking at the second sentence, because the second sentence puts the blame for the abuse on the victim. Why is it going to help to refer to very natural, normal behavior as a type of abuse and then blame yourself for it? I don't think that benefits anybody's mental health. If anything, I think it actually does more harm to your mental health. If you're a victim of abuse, you've already got a lot to worry about. You don't need to now convince yourself that you are gaslighting yourself. I think that's nonsense, and I really don't want my clients using that term, because now they're taking the blame for what somebody else did to them. They did it to you, but now you're going to take on the responsibility and blame for that and call it self-gaslighting? Not if you're coming to me for therapy or not. Now, finally, the other reason why I reject this term self-gaslighting is because it gives you the impression that it's bad to question yourself. And I simply believe that that isn't true either. In fact, I think that questioning is good. Skepticism is part of discovering truth. And while it is never a good thing to overdo anything, including thinking itself is a good thing. Questioning ourselves, even doubting ourselves, when done correctly, can lead us to a stronger sense of confidence in what we know. And so the bottom line is, guys, I reject this term self-gaslighting. I think it does more harm than good. I think it takes some very natural, normal mental processes, such as doubting and questioning, and it also takes the natural result of somebody programming and brainwashing you and putting that on you as if it's your fault. And I don't think it's ever a good thing to blame ourselves for our abuse. The way that we avoid this is the same way that we protect ourselves from gaslighting in the first place, not just self-gaslighting, all gaslighting. And that is the subject of the next video. I'm Jen Guerriero, and this is Poisonous People. Thanks for watching.